Hello everyone. I've noticed that in community of people who practice telekinesis, there's a lot of you who question if what you're doing is telekinesis or is it maybe a wind. Now, I wanted to first of all tell you that wind is actually having a very important role in telekinesis. You see, it would be quite hard for someone who was raised in the environment where they grew up believing that telekinesis is not something natural or attainable to start practicing it, where you should remember that most people start practicing it with a question in their mind if it's even real. So it would be hard for someone like that to start practicing telekinesis and after some time of practice just attain it. It would be too much of a shock for our brains and beliefs and everything included. And besides, it wouldn't happen in the first place. Wind, or rather the idea of it in our head, the possibility of it being a wind, gives our mind in the first place a possibility. It gives us a chance for something like that, for the phenomena in which we are able to affect something without your physical input, without a physical touch to it. So the idea, the possibility in your mind that what we are doing is wind is actually making a role of our mind allowing for this to happen in the first place. So especially if you are a beginner, just have in mind that without the idea of wind in our minds, without this possibility, our mind wouldn't allow something like that to happen in the first place. It isn't about having insecurities. It isn't about resenting the idea of telekinesis and replacing it with is just wind. It's about understanding that the idea, just the pure idea of wind, of possibility of a wind we make, moving it, allows for a certain phenomena to happen in the first place. And that's actually also one of the most difficult stages of telekinesis, where your brain is making the transition from not believing in telekinesis to believing that certain thing can be affected without a direct physical touch, and later on to the idea that telekinesis is possible. But for that, we need that idea of wind for this transition phase. You cannot go from A to C without a B in between. And the wind is exactly that B in between that takes us to C. So next time, your mind will quietly whisper to you, what if it's wind? Just let it and don't react to it, don't respond to it. Just accept it as a possibility because it will help your mind adapt to it. So what I would recommend for you as a beginner, as a way to deal with it and go about it, is to practice while having fun, with not trying to validate if telekinesis is real, or validate yourself if you have skills or abilities or potential or anything in general for this skill to happen. Don't come into the practice of telekinesis with a goal of proving or validating something, be it, as I said, yourself or telekinesis. Go to it in a way of not questioning if it's real, but rather how can it be real? How can you make it happen? The most fun you will have with telekinesis is when you will not judge yourself, when you will not try to prove something, but when you will just literally play. An important thing to also remember is that there is a thing, a type of telekinesis called areokinesis, which is basically affecting air particles, affecting wind. So even affecting wind and air particles is also a way of affecting something. We shouldn't be in a mindset where we try to separate one thing from another. Because as I said in one of my earlier videos that I did, we cannot do something, we cannot affect something if it isn't connected to the rest of things, because if something is affected, if something is moving, it wouldn't be able to do that or even exist if it wouldn't be connected to the rest of the things around it. Like, for example, if you try to move a tinfoil, it has to be connected to air particles anyways, because it is moving in that space of air particles. It is affected by the surface it moves on, and on anything above it. The fact that we can even see it is affected by photons and the way our eyes work. So next time you're doing telekinesis, focus more on having fun with it, on moving it itself. Don't focus on the fact of what is moving it, or if it's you, or if it's telekinesis, if it's wind. Don't focus on any of that. As a beginner, that phase of a wind being a possibility is the best to wait it out by having simply fun with it. Don't care if it's wind, don't care if it's you focus on the pure activity of it. Focus on the pure idea that you are the one who is moving it, and don't question it. Just have fun with it, with the idea of it. That is the best and most fun way to attain telekinesis. Do not try to validate it, but rather having just pure fun with the idea of it. Try to play like a kid. You know, when you're in your shower and the the water is flowing through your fingers and you imagine you can shoot water from yourself, right? So imagine this kind of imagination where something happens and you can just have fun with imagining stuff about it, with feeling it, you know? And that is also a great stage to develop a feeling of connection, of feeling of this magnetism towards something. So the most you get yourself in the idea, the fantasy that something is actually close by you, the more you get into this nice, happy, childish feeling of exploration, the more you're gonna actually connect to it. The most of a trap when it comes to mindset and telekinesis is trying to prove something. Is trying to prove your friends, your family, everyone who says it's wind, that it's not wind. And at the end you end up doubting yourself, you end up trying to prove it to yourself. So just remember, have that possibility of wind in your mind, but don't react to it. Don't let yourself dive into the idea that it's only wind. First of all, there's always going to be some kind of wind. There's obviously no way you can move, for example, your hand in telekinesis and that the air particles will not be moved. But this is not a question of if it's wind, but rather is it enough even wind to move it? Because sometimes the movement cannot make enough wind to do it. It will move particles, but not necessarily make enough wind to move something. So let's not get lost in the idea of wind or telekinesis, because dividing those two doesn't bring us anything, and trying to prove something by either one of those is not bringing us any closer to the pure practice of telekinesis and actually growing and enjoying it. I was the one who was starting with areokinesis. I was going to the forest, I was playing with the wind, and I didn't care if I'm doing something. I didn't care if I'm making the wind or not. I just had pure fun with connecting to the environment, connecting to the weather, connecting to the air around me, and connecting to pure movement of things, pure movement of plants and trees. And I feel the same way about telekinesis. I let myself be excited, even when I was a beginner, and I knew and I saw the small shaking of something. I let myself be excited. Not by the idea that I attained telekinesis, but by the same idea that I did something by the pure intention of it. And speaking of, the most important thing to have is trust to yourself. The most important thing is that you have the intention to make something move without your physical input. And that is the intention we should be guided with while doing the telekinesis. Just the fact that you put the intention is already enough to do something. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to validate and prove yourself to others in order to enjoy something you do. It's as ridiculous as laying on the bed and saying you're meditating and others saying that you're sleeping. Just because something looks like something doesn't mean it is. So you don't have to prove to people that you're doing what you're doing. And you don't have to prove it to yourself. You don't have to strip yourself out of your self-confidence, out of your trust, out of your authenticity. If you know what you're doing, you don't need any proof towards it. If you trust yourself, you don't need to validate anything to anyone, including yourself. Stop letting people tell you what do you need to do and how to do it. Because that's the worst trap you can get yourself into. If you want to do something, being whatever, being telekinesis, being whatever you do in your life, if you do it in order to satisfy someone's needs, in order to prove yourself to someone, it is never gonna be fun. It is never gonna be authentic. So just remember to trust yourself, to be authentic, but with yourself. Stop letting people control you, your sense of self, your sense of authenticity, your confidence, your beliefs, your thoughts. If I would ever listen to anyone and what they are saying to me and what their opinions are and what I need to do in order to prove them something, I would never be in the place I am today. Because the truth is, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. As long as you trust yourself and you know what you're doing, that's enough. The idea of trying to prove telekinesis to someone is ridiculous and unrealistic. The practice itself is not something to be proven to someone. None of the practices are made to be proven to someone. It's like with any other thing. Don't listen to people telling you to do something specific way in order for them to validate you, to validate if you're doing something authentically. If you're drawing, for example, in manga, anime way, or comics, you're an artist, and if someone stands up to you and says, unless you paint something for me, unless you paint realistically and you paint a nature or a forest for me, then you're not an artist. It's ridiculous. Just because someone expects you to do something a specific way, that specific way of doing it, for example, a telekinesis without hands, or telekinesis from 2 meters away, or telekinesis with a mask on, that specific way does not validate it. There's millions of people, there's millions of proofs you can make to people. There's no absolute proof for anything that you do, because everyone has their own opinion. Some people might not believe in it in the first place. They might not even need a proof to already not believe in it. And no matter what proof you will show to them, they will not believe in it. Just as people, with the example from before, some people might not find art respectable. And no matter what they do, they're not gonna see art as something worth attention or worth respect. So it doesn't matter how many things you will do, in whatever specific way you will do them. It will never be enough for some of the people. So have enough of a self-trust, have enough of an authenticity within yourself to not let people define your worth, your authenticity, your realness. You don't need people to tell you what to do and how to do it. Just as you don't need anyone to tell you what to do with your life, with your career, with your love life, with yourself and with your health. It is up to you what you do and what do you find right. You can listen to suggestions, you can listen to anything you want, but it's up to you at the end of the day what you do and what you trust into. And I notice so many people, so many people trying to prove themselves, trying to prove their practice and their skills to people around. So many skeptics going around and just asking people to prove their practice to them. And I find it ridiculous and I find it sad because I can see how many people are trying to prove and validate themselves using others, and usually it is skeptics. And then I cannot imagine the type of emotions, the type of an effect it has on them when the skeptics just say whatever they want and they still don't see something as a proof for something. And I can see how discouraging it might be for some people. I can see what kind of conversation are going on under my videos, be it here or being on TikTok or being whatever it is. And sometimes I wish I could stop those conversations. Sometimes I wish I could delete certain comments. I don't do it because I know that it will never end. People will never stop questioning. People will never stop asking for proofs. But the least you can do is not try to prove it to anyone, including yourself. I can see such an ignorant or closed-minded or skeptical and negative people just killing the whole fun, the whole excitement, the whole passion in people just because of a few skeptic comments, just because of even one word. And I can see people fighting back for their beliefs, for their passion, for their excitement. And it's tragic to look sometimes at those comments and see how the hope in some people dies. Well, all we want to do is just have fun with certain ideas and imaginations and practices. And I wish that community for telekinesis would be more friendly and more accepting and more open-minded. I see so many reasons for people to practice telekinesis, and some of them are really so pure and so innocent and so fulfilling. And then I can just see people attacking everyone, one another. If someone doesn't believe in telekinesis, if someone doesn't believe in anything similar, they will always find a way to disprove it for you. I've seen so many weird, so many made up theories about my videos that it's sometimes even funny to read them. The strings, the magnets, the things that I would sometimes not even have enough of creativity to even think of. It's all just mind games, people trying to prove their beliefs on you, on themselves. It's not worth the fight, it's not worth to your passion, to your fun to be destroyed. If you're someone who genuinely likes the practice of telekinesis, who finds it helpful, who finds it fun, who finds it anyway valuable for themselves, in a valuable way for them life, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone.